Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Conquest of the Planet of the Apes from 1972. Every time there's a new Planet of the Apes movie, I kind of go back through the sequels because I don't know them as well, and I'm just very curious about them. So this is sort of a series that every time it's Planet of the Apes, I make one of these. And because it's a pop culture I happened before I was born, I'm very interested in it. And this was an interesting movie. This is sort of the sci-fi of ideas and less the sci-fi of spectacle that we're used to today. But I think it is the ideas of this film make this film pop to an extreme degree, which I was kind of surprised by. I do think there's oftentimes where I'm looking at this film and, Roddy McDowall's wearing ape makeup and people are wearing very obvious ape masks and things, also talking about ideas of slavery, of imperialism, of fascism, of an insane, crazy sci-fi future. And it is a really fascinating film. In fact, I found it so captivating because of everything that was going on. I often, there'd be sometimes this film is not, is a little clunky or doesn't explain something so well, but that would take me out of it for me to realize, like, this is a silly movie, but I am very into it. And it was actually a pretty fascinating experience because although I've liked the other sequels, this is something else. This is something else. I was very surprised, and I'd heard from people who were older than me who grew up with it that this was influenced by or talking about the Watts riots, that the writer of this film, Paul Dean, was very influenced by that and talking about the things of the day and race riots and things like that. But in this, it's about the apes. Now, the continuity of this is like why the Planet of the Apes 70s movies are a wild ride. So basically, to catch you up to where we are now, in case you're watching this and don't know, and this is sort of not spoilers, but yeah, there's Planet of the Apes. You find out they're on Earth, blah, blah, blah. There's the sequel. They blow up the world. And then in the third one, Cornelius and Zira were on a spaceship that Charlton Heston's character used. It was, since they nuclear bombed the old Earth out of existence, it pushed them through a time portal or something, and they went back in time to modern day Earth. And then that didn't work out so good. And then they're killed. And their baby grows up to be the monkey in this, played by Roddy McDowall, who was also Cornelius and stuff. But he is Caesar. And in this film starts off... Explain this film. That was a quick Planet of the Apes refresher. And in this film, it starts off... basically what happened is they were killed, Cornelius and Zira, and the humans found out they were pregnant, but also knew they were from an ape world, where apes ruled and humans didn't. And when they found out Zira was pregnant, they were incredibly threatened by this. So they tried to basically, kill her, and they do kill them, and they think they killed the baby, but Zira switched out the baby from a circus run by everyone's favorite, or at least mine, Ricardo Montalban. So at the beginning of this film took place in, I think, the 70s, pretty much. Who cares? It happened a long time ago, because now, a long enough time ago that Caesar has grown up. And in this film, it's 1991, which at the time was the future, and now is very much the past. And that makes me sad, because I remember when 1991 felt like the future. But doesn't matter. So Caesar is basically being shown around by Ricardo Montalban. They're promoting their circus. Ricardo Montalban's character is taken in by the bad guys, and then Caesar decides to inundate himself with the other monkeys who are basically slaves. Now, how are all the monkeys slaves? This is how this movie gets complicated. So basically, Cornelius and Zira, it is believed, brought a space virus or something, and the space virus somehow killed all the cats and dogs. So obviously that's why everyone turned into fascists. Makes sense to me. But no, they don't say that, but you think it. Anyway, that's why nobody's chill, because there's no cats and dogs. I get it. But they at first make all the apes their pets. But then they decide, wait, apes are really easy to train. And we're humanity, and we're, in general kind of suck. So we're going to train them to be our slaves, not just our pets, which is honestly would probably is what happened. So Caesar is seeing all these apes basically, work in restaurants. You tip them with raisins, and they, do janitorial work, and they do deliveries, and they do, all the shitty jobs my generation ends up with. So Caesar decides to kind of get into this, and he ends up working for the main guy who hates apes despite using them as slave labor. Whatever. But Caesar slowly starts a revolution. And this film is sort of about him, like, teaching the other apes to sort of fight back. In some ways, this film is a very radical 70s film. In fact, so much so that I was honestly shocked that this happened and they let them get away with this, and that there's another movie after this. You'd think, watching this one, that Fox would be like, yo, what the fuck was that? Like, we're done. No, apparently this was successful, which is really cool. I actually think that's really amazing. This is a very dark, bleak science fiction film, but at the same time, it's very silly and goofy. I think it depends on, I would say, people talk about film literacy and stuff like that, but if you're able to get the ideas off of this rather than just roll your eyes, be like, well, they're in suits, and I am smart enough to know that they're in suits, good for you. You know that. Cool. But it's like one of those things where, like, you talk to someone and go, did you get all the ideas about, like, the idea of man and man's, like, internal, a ways of, like, destroying itself and enslaving people so it's easier for them and not thinking of the consequences. And they're like, yeah, but they're in monkey suits. So if you're one of those, stop watching this. I'm sorry that that's media literacy to me. To me, it was like, I was so into this ideas, and I was like, oh my God. Every time I watch one of these, I'm like, man, the Planet of the Apes franchise is insanely interesting. So I think you do have to get over that. Now, on the side of that, I will say there are 2 points. There are major points in the film that are not presenting the information in the greatest way. That would be Ricardo Montalban explaining basically all the backstory of the pets and how the monkeys are where they are and stuff by just walking Caesar around. And I guess we're to believe, because Caesar's just been in the circus this whole time, that he doesn't fully know that. But, like, I feel like he would know that, and it's just clunky, and I wish they presented it better. I will, like, sort of fault the film for that one. And then the other thing is when Caesar is sort of, like, rallying the apes, he sort of just looks at them, and when it sort of starts, I actually rewound the movie. It was like, did I, like, fall asleep? Did I miss a scene? I didn't. It's just like, that was, they're kind of 2 major plot points, and the fact that they aren't explained super well, I sort of get why people don't like that element of the film and criticize the storytelling. Like, it's not presented in the best way, but the ideas that are telling are really intelligent. This was directed by the director J. Lee Thompson, who directed this in the last Battle for the Planet of the Apes, the last of the original series. He did Guns of Navarone and a lot of Charles Bronson stuff in the 80s as, like, the Fourth Death Wish, and but he also did the original Cape Fear, which I think is not the one that Scorsese did. But to bring this back to the Simpsons and Planet of the Apes musical, I actually did do a lot of research on this for a long time ago before I had a YouTube channel, because I cared so much. Was the Simpsons Cape Fear episode influenced by Cape Fear, which had just come out in theaters, or the original? And a lot of my friends who are animators and stuff were like, no, it can't be. It's the remake. And I listened to the audio commentary and watched the original, and it is definitely the original that they're mostly influenced by. They just use certain scenes, but those scenes are also in the original. So it's sort of like a paired thing, but for the most part, the thing they used for research was the original. So J. Lee Thompson, I guess, is sort of, with both Planet of the Apes, which he was offered to direct the original one, and Cape Fear, is sort of, connection to the Simpsons, sort of. I'm reaching, but you get it. I think one thing about the 70s that I find truly fascinating is how directly they wanted to, in mass media, and this is, a thing that kids are getting action figures of and stuff, like the mecha toys, wanted to confront major issues and talk about them. And I think, this does talk about, slavery and man's need to kind of evolve, but not really thinking about the overall consequences, which is something we still have today. Think about, like, the short term and how easy we have it, but not thinking about what they're doing to the apes and what would obviously eventually happen. This film, I won't get into the ending, but this film was originally a lot darker than it actually is. There is a director's cut. It specifically is about the beginning and the end, so I won't talk about it, but I watched the original cut. They made a nicer ending, I guess. I think in the end, both sort of say the same thing, but sometimes I think audiences and man should have to deal with some of the consequences of this thing, and I think that's the case for that sequence. I think they should as an audience. The Planet of the Apes films are kind of dark and big bummers a lot of the times. You watch them and you're thinking about life and the defeat of man and things like that. But I think that's honestly what makes it so great, is it kind of talks about the weaknesses of society and how teaching and lessons and how we take the wrong lessons and jump to conclusions and like where we are in society and like it is a depressing franchise. It's not as fun and silly as you might think it is. And I think Conquest of the Planet of the Apes very much does that. Roddy McDowall does a great performance. While watching this, I honestly am like, I wish Roddy McDowall got to see what the Apes movies became after his death. The Tim Burton movie, I think it's okay. He missed that, but the rest of them, I think he would have liked these. But he was amazing as Caesar. Actually, a really great performance. I like Ricardo Montalban quite a bit, not just as Khan, but in other stuff. Reviewed old classic movies with him too. I think he's a real presence. I wish he had gotten to do more. I know he's sort of like a chewing the scenery guy, but he's also playing a guy who runs a circus, so to me, like, kind of a perfect casting, honestly. This is, you can tell this is an early, peak 70s, 72s around, Godfather coming out, this is pre-Jaws, so this is like the darkness of, if you're going to have a major franchise at this time, what it would be. But I do think, and this was also shot, I think it was shot in Century City, which is a part of LA. I don't really know. I think that's where Barbie took place. It has that kind of modernist architecture. I think people would call it architectural riot proof, which is interesting considering what happens in there in the movie. But it gives it this kind of like modernist future look, which I think works for it, especially because that's how people thought the immediate future would look and were designing architecture to look. So as much as it's, they use, a new, just simple locations, they were effective locations. I know they did do this on the cheap. Like the reason they're all wearing jumpsuits is so they didn't have to put people in full monkey makeup. They like cut a lot of corners. They used Irwin Allen sets and costumes and like they borrowed from stuff. But like I always say, it's like, it's not so much, look at how cheap this is. It's like, how did you use it effectively? And I think using those sets effectively to show, that's how modern sci-fi was, but they don't use it in like, it's not to show off the technology, it's kind of to show the sadness of man. And I think how we view technology at the time and how we view the future at the time, and I think it works within that. I think this is a challenging, interesting film, probably more interesting than all the thing, just glancing at it and think, it was funny watching it, because I was like, this is inherently silly, but it is probably one of the more purposeful, serious films I've seen in a while, and definitely one of the more political ones, talking about the injustices in the world and how man allows those things to be out of hatred, out of prejudice, and out of just frankly the need for constant power. Even the reason they're into this mess in the first place is because they couldn't, figure out something with Cornelius and Zira. They had to destroy them, and man's need to destroy things rather than to make a compromise might be its ultimate downfall, and in these films it sort of is. So I think this film very much preaches that through a way of ideas. It's not just going to show you two people with guns and then they just kill each other. It's going to talk about the need and how they got to that point and why they picked up the guns and the need to do that in the first place. I've heard people say this is one of the best sequels. I think it's probably one of the most under talked about, because I hear a lot about Beneath more so than the later two. It seems like people who are really into these films like the later two. I haven't seen Battle yet. When there's another Planet of the Apes film, I'll review that. But as of right now, I get why the people who are really into these like at least this one. I think it's a very strong, interesting, fascinating film that is politically talking about, I think, things that very few franchises would want to take this head on, but Planet of the Apes does, and despite people in silly monkey masks, is probably talking more about man and the people who would just laugh off the things from discriminatory or discriminate or just take the easy road and not think about the consequences of their actions and then eventually getting taken over by apes, probably because of man's own short-sightedness, it's a dark thing to think about, but I think ultimately it's how these films always are. They always show you how we ended up things, and like the interesting time loop of this whole sort of movie is how, in a sense, them going back to explore ended up, man's need to explore and learn and show off its technological prowess and understanding easier things could ultimately be its undoing. I still think that in a lot of ways, and I think Planet of the Apes and Conquest of the Planet of the Apes is a deeper movie than it has any right to be, but I think says it in a way that you can't walk away from this film and not think about those issues and think about how maybe doomed we are, and hope maybe we won't lead to our own destruction and ultimately become a Planet of Apes. So if you have seen Conquest of the Planet of the Apes and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.